No, it's true. Like there's I, they called it the loudness wars, and I was reading about how it started in basically it started in radio, and they've been doing all sorts of heavy duty inline processing to compress signals to get them loud, to get them to be recognizable, and that was part of the brand. That was like, what made a radio station have a sound, and so they would compete with each other over it. And it's the kind of thing where like, man, it was like ruthless.
I mean, the equalization for what's professional quality stuff is just, it's so blasted and maxed out. Um, I realize what a lot of people consider professional sounding stuff is just
Over processed.
It's over processed, but it over stimulates their sensory nodes, and that's why it feels overwhelmingly, um, like, what's the word? There's like a wave of something that you can't understand.
Oh, it's like it's how we perceive loudness, really.
Right, yeah. It like fucks with your senses, but because it's organized and it's not completely noise, then it throws off our perception of what it actually is.
Well, psychoacoustics is really crazy how that works. How just like by implying, you can imply sounds with the harmonic overtones that would be associated with it.
Yep.
But you can also it's like most music people listen to, unless they're listening to it on like a giant sound system, have never actually heard the fundamental frequencies of the bass or even the drums. And drums are huge on the spectrum. Yeah. Drums fill the entire spectrum. Cymbals fill the entire spectrum. They're so incredible that we can't actually reproduce that. I saw this thread where this guy was like, "Hey, what kind of software can I use to rip audio from a DVD or a Blu-ray to MP3?" And this person's like, "Why would you do that? MP3 sounds like crap." But most people can't tell anyways. In my mind, it's like, yeah, I mean, the only time you can tell is when you're in an acoustically treated studio environment with calibrated monitoring, so you can know exactly.
And if it's at a high enough bitrate, you can't tell.
Yeah, if it's a high enough bitrate, it's like
you can't.
And also, if the quality of your converters are sufficiently high, then it'll overcome a lot of that because you introduce it to an analog circuit, which kind of normalizes everything into a, what we consider to be an analog signal, digital to analog conversion. So it's always been this kind of like perplexing, like, where, chicken or egg, does the bass come from the music or does the bass come from the playback system? Is the bass inherently there? And I know it isn't.
It's both.
It's both.
Yeah.
But for the longest time, we didn't have playback systems that were accurate enough or powerful enough to reproduce all of those frequencies. So it was built into the music even more. This trend I've noticed especially in drum and bass lately, is that the music is becoming less compressed. It's becoming more open and has more depth. And I've noticed this too in actually trap music is huge on depth.
Well, I think it's like the natural counter balance from all the overproduction. Everything was overproduced, and it peaked in 2015 pretty much.
Yeah.
I think minimalism started to resurge, and then less emphasis on the production aspect of the composition and more on the composition itself.
Yeah.
I mean, across all music, and not just drum and bass. It was trap. It was
all electronic music.
Dubstep. Yeah.
It all became more. I remember asking a friend of mine. It's like all this stuff, bro step, dubstep, chill step, liquid drum and bass, neurofunk, even some jump up. They can all be put into one mix if you do it right.
Oh yeah.
But I remember when I brought this up, they're like, "Oh God, but bro step has so many key changes." It's like, so listen to it, learn it, and then make track selections that can work together, that take the listener on the journey.
Well, and these software suites now tell you what keys the shit's in.
Oh
so
yeah.
That's not even really an excuse anymore. And that to me is kind of one of the reasons, like, the old school method of DJing is like, it's inferior. I don't think there's a question of like, okay, I started off on like Gemini's and worked my way up to Technics 1200s. Now, if we're talking about belt drive turntables, obviously Technics are pretty much the top of the line. But when it comes to performance, there is a lot that is left that you can't do with techniques in a mixer that you can do with the software program, and a lot of that has to
Yeah.
do with like mixing proper keys and the
Yeah.
actual proper BPMs.
You know,
Because
there's a really good video of oh god, who's it? Jazzy Jeff, I believe,
Mhm.
and he's like at this you know, turntablism, beat juggling, chopper convention, and it's like, you know, the big show, and they put him on stage, and he's doing his scratching techniques, and he's a he's a really incredible DJ. He's got some chops. He can do things with two turntables that are like, holy crap! Until you know, witness Qbert,
Right.
and then you're like, what the fuck did I just see?
Mhm.
But the thing that I thought was interesting about this is that they brought the guy who won the whole event. They brought him on stage with his Akai MPC setup, and he just like, you know, had the same files.
Was it
loaded.
Arab music?
I think so. You know, and then
Arab music is
and
a
they're
beast.
like, they're basically playing. He's basically playing whatever.
Yeah,
Whatever.
Arab music can do with that sound machine what anybody can do with like a drum set and a fucking like orchestra. Basically,
Yeah.
he's like really fucking good with that.
You know, that's the thing though. It's like at a point, it's not like, and that's like, which is better, mandolin or banjo? To me, they're both instruments at this point. It's almost like a really strange. There are always going to be things that a synthesizer can do that a piano can't do.
Right.
But it doesn't make the piano less of an instrument. It just actually raises the bar or the threshold for who is actually good at that instrument. When you
No, I think it does in fact make it less of an instrument because what you have, like a good example of this is when you have a piano interpretation of a pop song or like they'll do piano versions of like
and
Metallica.
it's always a weird ballad.
Yeah, exactly, and it's because it's you have bass and you have treble, but it's still a single instrument. Whereas when you have a bass guitar versus a
You know, I've gotten into arguments about this, but I don't think pianos rock. They roll, but they just you know, the piano roll.
Yeah.
it's a thing, but pianos don't rock the way that a guitar or a bass can or a drum set can. It's
oh, it's true.
oh yeah, even Black Cat knows. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's hard to electrify a piano.
Yeah, it is.
Where it's really easy to electrify a guitar.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the guitar
but then,
evolved into an electric instrument, and the piano, the only thing that translated was really samples of it and the keyboard.
I think
And even then, the keyboard is losing traction as like the primary instrument or input method
Yeah.
for electronic music.
Oh yeah.
So
But I think a good example of this is Elton John. In that, I don't think anybody in their right mind would call him a rocker.
no,
Like you can call Pinball Wizard.
he makes pop music.
Yeah.
He makes really good pop music.
Yeah,
Fantastic
but it's not
lyrics.
rock and roll.
No.
I don't think by any stretch of the imagination it's rock and
I
roll.
don't think that.
It's in a style of rock and roll sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's not rock and roll because if you look at the rock and roll that's coming out during those periods, it's not
It's not
tonally the same. It's not
structurally.
structurally.
Yeah.
No, it's its own thing.
Well, I feel like it has as much to do with theater as it does with everything. You know.
Well, but it's weird because a piano is still a percussive and a stringed instrument at
Yeah.
the same time. So
It has hammers.
yeah, it's in this weird space where
And then there are guys like John Cage who put like erasers and screws in between the strings
Right.
to elicit weird harmonics and make them out of tune for his prepared music.
But I mean,
But even then, that's like a different realm. That's not quite the same direction. That would be like taking a turntable and making the belt or drive mechanism fail intermittently, and then working that into the performance.
so I think part of what we're getting at is if music is not meant to make someone dance, what is it actually meant to do? And this is where, like, the idea of somebody trying to dance to a John Cage song is pretty preposterous. Because then, if nobody can dance to it, if it's music, what is it? like what's its purpose then? And I think that's where we get this element of like getting back to the DJs. The more you get away from modern tools and go back into the traditional DJ tools, the less danceable it is in a modern context. In the same way that like you can't dance to somebody beat juggling or scratching. Like
Oh
that
no,
shit's undanceable.
when the turntablists were on in the at the party, man, everyone stood still and watched.
Yeah,
It was
which is
like
where
it was like the premium church moment where everyone was silent and observant.
yeah,
It was really
which,
surreal, actually.
I mean, I've been to those types of events, and then it's like, what are we doing here? It becomes like an ego stroke for the DJ at that point, and that's kind of where, in that, I think that there is a misallocation of turntablism as the focus of the DJ instead of actually getting the party moving. Whereas turntablism is obviously a skill and a thing, but the DJ traditionally is supposed to be getting the fucking party moving, getting people like hopping off the wall. You're not supposed to have wallflowers if you're a DJ. And that's kind of where turntablism turns the entire fucking room into wallflowers. So in that, that's kind of where I had to look at what DJs were doing and look at what the culture was like focusing on and see if that was actually in the best interest of the party. And at the end of the day, it's really not. And that's kind of where it like the old people who said guitars aren't instruments are the same people who come into the DJ world and be like, if you use a DJ mix program, you're not a real fucking DJ.
But dude, like
it's the same shit.
But virtual DJ or Serato or Tractor or even Mix, they all have these advanced properties where that you can apply to the music itself, like
Yeah.
cue points. So if the song's not getting the crowd going, you can get out pretty
Yep,
easily.
yep.
There are a lot more opportunities to alter the direction
Yep.
of the dance floor energy once you have that kind of. I mean, you got to do a lot of data entry. You've got to index your files at this point.
There's
And-
more to it than just DJing.
Yeah.
To do it right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you got to like break down you can even break down sections into their own, key components, and then approach tracks like modally, where you're operating in them through like different motifs. I think that's actually, it's funny. I was listening to Goldie's Timeless recently, and it's from like the early '90s, I think, and structurally, it's a lot more like a really long symphony than it is.
Well, all the drum and bass stuff was symphonic structure
Yeah.
for the early
Half of the '90s, right?
yeah, and what ended up happening was it was too
It was too long form.
It was too long form because those tracks were meant to be mixed.
Yeah.
And people were writing them to be mixed, but also to be able to stand on their own if you end up pulling it off and listening to it for that specific track.
Yeah.
But then there's just too much shit in the gaps that didn't make enough of a statement to keep that form valid. So then, drum and bass songs used to be like 6-7 minutes long.
Some of them were 9 minutes long.
Yeah, some of them were 9, and now they're like 3.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Maybe.
Oh, no, occasionally.
I've seen some fucking 2.5.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Where you're like, what? How do you even, I've seen some tracks where you're like, how do you even mix this shit? In the sense of, if somebody tried to mix that on regular turntables, they wouldn't be able to do it. You'd only be able to do it on a digital turntable.
Yeah, and you have to do a lot of planning. And there's actually, I think it's, I usually file tracks like that under tension because it's the kind of thing that requires so much pre-planning that's what the third and fourth decks are for. Is
Right.
you get all these things lined up early, so in case you use them, they're ready for you. But sometimes you don't need them, and they're like, you just can't, because a battle on the dance floor doesn't ensue because that culture is not really present.
Yeah, I mean, and even with that, I realized there's like some tracks like that where the only way to play that track is you have to find the proper entrance and exit in other tracks. So then to play one track, you have to play 2 other tracks.
Yeah.
And that kind of planning is something that I'm not sure many people really understand how to do, or that it actually goes into pulling off a really good set that's cohesive and also flows. So there's an element of like what people think DJing is because of what they see and then what it actually entails to actually keep a crowd moving.
Well, I think that electronic music in general, there's a disconnect about what it looks like when it's being made and performed.
Yeah.
I've always felt that, like, the DJ presentation is critical to the way that we experience electronic music in a lot of ways, because a lot of times the arrangements are too complicated for a human to do on their own.
Right.
And I mean, there was a period of time when, like, who was it, Jean-Michel Jarre, and they were doing these big live performances, but it was highly improvisational, and it was more like big flowy ambient music.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Some of that stuff's really cool. I'm pretty sure that a lot of that stuff got mined for the earlier, techno voyages, and eventually would become the sounds of trance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it is. Because a lot of the sounds probably end up in drum and bass and jungle and house music and all the genres now. Because it's old enough that it would have been like a foundation level generation of sound.
Yeah.
But that kind of performance is incredibly expensive. I mean, those were like stupid expensive synthesizers they had back then, because they were huge.
Mm-hmm.
A Moog was the size of 2 laptops, and that was just the control panel. And then they would have these giant bookshelf-looking modular systems, $100,000 synthesizers in today's money.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible stuff. I mean, you can't take that on the road.
Right.
You can't set that up on a stage if you're a up-and-coming artist. Most up-and-coming artists don't even have access to that kind of technology, so
yeah.
I think that's why the turntable is always so interesting. When I say turntable, I'm also referring to control-based systems and laptop-based systems, because they have platters. It controls the deck. It's analogous. I'm not going to split hairs about this anymore, but there's something that's always very, very cool about that, because the turntable in itself is because it was kind of a simplified version of the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not only is this track awesome, but it also is a reflection of the DJ's taste in music.
Right.
And then their track selection always reflected their ability to lead the party in a lot of ways.
Well, and I think that's such an important element of, depending on what time of the night it is, too. There's a difference between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. and midnight and 1 a.m. And if you're a DJ, you have to know what time it is in order to play to the proper crowd. Because at 7 p.m., people aren't ready to dance yet. They want more chill stuff. It's 10 p.m., starting to get warmed up. By midnight, that's when the shit's popping off. And at 1, they're starting to transition out of it. So it's like, people don't want that super abrasive, fucking heavy, metallic bass stuff at 1 a.m.
No, you only
or
get
7 p.m.
You only get 15 to 20 minutes of that, really.
Yeah, really. And it, a real DJ understands that shit has a limited window every night. But somebody who thinks they're good because they can mix things will just play a set, even if it doesn't matter what time it is. They'll play the same set because that's what they practiced. And that to me is the difference between somebody who is a DJ for themselves versus somebody who's a DJ for the audience.
Yeah.
Because it's not a problem to be a DJ for yourself, because then you find people who want to hear you specifically for your stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different thing. But then those people make it confusing when the audience just wants to hear some shit. And then you get DJs getting mad at requests and stuff. And that shit is crazy to me.
I think that the request is fundamental to the DJ.
Oh, of course. I mean,
if you have something close to what
it's fundamental to the party. Because my rule is, if I don't have it and somebody requests it, if they can get it to me, I'll fucking play that shit. I'll mix it into my set. Because what happens is, if you have somebody who wants to hear a song and they also enjoy your shit, if you're able to mix your style and the tracks they want to hear, that gets them a fan of you, and it gets them nostalgic about some shit they already know, and it transcends both. So that's kind of where the idea of not taking requests as a DJ to me is so weird, in that people get offended when they get requests and make it a thing. But that's what I'm like, man. What are those people DJing for? If you're at a point where you get offended because somebody at a party wants to hear a specific song and you happen to be the person mixing the music, what is that person that gets offended? Like,
well, they're never going to get booked for a wedding.
Right. Yeah, no, that's very true.
I think people need to understand a wedding is a really good gig.
Yeah.
A wedding can be worth a lot.
Well, weddings pay. I mean, a wedding DJ makes more than a real DJ.
Well, yeah.
Like, there's only a few quote unquote real DJs that actually make money, and they're either touring with somebody who's a headliner, who they're mixing a pre-mix set for,
Part of a festival.
or yeah, exactly, part of a festival, and that person has done that shit for a long time, not being profitable. Yeah. So it's kind of like there's very few non-wedding DJs who actually make money on a scale that would be comparable to wedding DJs. And that's what's so crazy about it, is like, everybody can respect the craft all they want, but at the end of the day, people don't give a shit about the craft. They just want to hear some fucking good music that makes them dance. Yeah. And that's like,
people aren't going to see James Zabila because he can operate, a bunch of equipment.
Right.
I mean, there probably are. There's probably a portion of the attendants that are there to be in the presence of him operating that rig he uses, because it's complicated.
But then those people are in the corner the whole time talking about how cool what he's doing is, and fucking not dancing with the crowd.
You can't even see that stuff anyways. All you can do is see like the back panel with the fucking cables coming out of it. It's not even like it's not like a guitar player on a stage where you can maybe see them if you work your way all the way to the front without getting found out.
Well, and even then, like, do you remember how often people used to train wreck?
Oh yeah.
Like you can't. You have to try to train wreck now if you're a DJ. You have to try because it's so hard, and that to me is like 100% better audio experience for the crowd. Nobody wants to hear somebody fucking poorly mixing tracks on a loud audio system.
I can only think of one situation where that might be interesting, and that's only if it's some like really minimal techno set where they get some kind of crazy echo going with the rest of the room, and then they start playing off that. And that's the only time I've ever heard anyone work themselves out of a train wreck, but they did it during like the peak of rocking out. It wasn't like they were playing a song, it was like the end of the record where it was just looping around itself.
I mean, I'm sure it was interesting, but I doubt it was fun for the audience.
No. I appreciate it on this very abstract level. For me, it was more of a, well, that's interesting. How they're going to get out of it? Holy crap, they got themselves out of it.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, go DJ, go. I'm pretty sure I was like one of like 5 people who were still paying attention at that point. So that's a poor use case or example. But that's the one I can think of. And even then, it was really more of a rubbernecking experience. Like, I always hated watching that stuff. Like, it's like watching something catch on fire.
Right. Well, I remember for a while, the bigger producers that DJ'd, they would have to bring CDJs because it was too expensive to press vinyl on their own shit on like the new tracks. So if they'd made a track within the last couple of weeks, they're gonna be using a CDJ. Like, none of the big guys didn't use a CDJ.
I always see these posts about like, we need CDJs or we need this kind of mixer, and so whoever has like the Nexus, the current Nexus setup, like the first one is like, I can do it, and agrees on some kind of, however they articulate that agreement, because it's going to get used. And fortunately, like, Pioneer makes some heavy duty shit. Like, their hardware is actually really resilient. I've seen some of their like CDJs go through like night after night after night after use, and they just keep going. So whatever kind of like rubber seal they're using around that drive mechanism, it's keeping all that fog juice and cigarette smoke from invading into the system.
Yeah. Yeah, those things are sealed really well. I got a, what is it? VM2. I forget the brand, but somebody spilled beer on it at a show, and I was like pissed for a minute, but then the shit didn't do anything. So I was like, well, all right, you got lucky today.
So when I was in high school and my dad and I were building guitars, he's like, "Yep, we got to christen it." And he poured a beer over it. I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Now you know that it's beer proof." So if being beer proof is a measure of quality, or it's a sign of something's roadworthiness, then it's not a bad idea. I'm not advocating anyone go pour beer on their laptop. I'm pretty sure only Lenovo makes like water resistant key beds. Everyone else has an open key tray that just kind of drains right onto the motherboard because money.
Yeah.
Gotta engage in the byproduct ecosystem.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like most stuff should be waterproof if it's electronic at this point.
Yeah, do you
There's
think?
not really an excuse for most
There
stuff.
really isn't.
Yeah.
In
2019, I mean, it sounds like for most people they're like, why?
Circuit boards should be hardened against water.
Yeah,
It's simple.
it's very simple, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that everything is built so cheaply. Like, it wouldn't be that much more expensive. It would just basically in throwaway culture in a sense of you wouldn't want to throw away shit that's waterproof because there's extra like care and
We
work
live in a
that
brave
goes
new
into it.
world where consumerism feeds the economy, and without it, economic growth would be stifled, and then institutions would crumble under their own weight, and then consumerism would fall apart, and then the cycle would perpetuate, and then everyone who is dependent on the consumer cycle and being a byproduct of that system what would they do? I'm pretty sure they still go to work.
I mean, they're not creative enough to not do it. Like, I feel like they would just keep going to work and expecting the same outcome and eventually just die. Like, well, I guess I didn't get my retirement. Like, I don't know, man. It's really like, okay, the idea, for example, of passive income. I keep seeing people talk about passive income for the past few years, and it's this weird, feudal, elitist notion that's being perpetuated that somehow someone somewhere can put money into something, and it just makes more money. It just makes more money, and it's passive income because it's basically putting up the shield of the
That
idea.
sounds like a Ponzi scheme.
Well, it's not a Ponzi scheme. It's disconnecting exploitation from the individual that's being exploited.
Huh?
It's putting up a wall between the exploiter, the person who's doing the exploiting, and saying, on the other side of this wall is someone who's getting underpaid and exploited, so I can get profit out of putting money into that. But because I live in a society that has now told me that it's good to get passive income, I'm going to ignore the exploitation that goes on with it. I'm just going to put my money in, turn my head the other way, and take my profit when they give me my returns. And just whether it was somebody in Malaysia or China who was working in a factory, had walls laced with lead, or a kid working, I'm just going to ignore that because I got my profit and the government said it was okay, so it must be okay. And you get this disconnect that's allowed to be perpetuated from this cycle, and I think that's where, if people, I think at one point they were trying to do a campaign to show everyone that everyone has slaves, and it kind of fell flat because people really were mentally prepared to block against that notion. When you have somebody who's in the lower rungs of American society that never leaves their state, they're not going to give a fuck about the actual poorest people in the world, because to them, their personal situation is still the most important. And then that's when we get, like, first world comfort is like, if you're the poorest person not living on the street and you're living in some sort of abode in the first world, you're like, nobody wants to compare themselves to the rest of human history, but we're living better than kings in some periods throughout human history in the poorest places in the first world. It's not true in the poorest places in developing nations in the third world, but in the first world, when you have running water, when you have electricity, when you have a roof over your head, you have access to the internet.
Most people live like, within a couple miles of a supermarket.
Right.
Where you can get, fresh beef or chicken or pork from the deli.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what, like, the stuff that we eat on a regular basis would have been prepared for a king's feast in many periods in history. And people be like, no, you're exact. No, literally. A lot of this stuff that we're eating now, taking for granted for everyday meals, would have been the quality and only accessible at the highest levels in some periods in history.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the time to think about history, you're not gonna care about that, let alone the poorest people on the planet right now. So that's kind of where Americans that never leave America or their own state are affecting global politics in a way that they don't understand, because they don't believe that they're actually that important or powerful. But consumerism gives people power.
Yeah.
And this is where everyone has given away their consumer power and just like let corporations tell them how to use it, so now nobody feels responsible for it or feels like it even exists.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it's this weird, on the one hand, like, if you hate capitalism as an individual, there's not much you can actually do about it except use your consumer power in that system. If you're born into a capitalist system, like, you're not going to overturn it by yourself. So the only thing you can really do to affect change is use that consumerist power. And people are not exercising that power or influence.
I read about a black family who were going to BW3 or B-Dubs or whatever for their kid's birthday, and it was requested that they not sit next to some customer who didn't want to sit next to black people. Well, they did leave.
Yeah.
But but it's one of those things, like, in this day and age, this is still happening. It's still happening, and of course corporate says, oh, this is in violation of our policies, we will investigate this. Lip service.
Right.
But it doesn't actually address, the real problem is that the corporate culture doesn't actually have control of itself.
Yeah.
And what might exist at the mission statement of the CIO or the CFO or the CEO or whomever is, like, making a decision about anything, and they can all handle it in their own way if they need to, but their ideas aren't fully reflected at the ground level. And I think that's actually what you're getting at, is the ground level doesn't realize that it represents everything else.
Supposed to.
No, it's supposed to. It's that.
Is it even possible, though? And I think that's the problem of, like, the idea of franchises now. We've been raised in a period where it's like you can go anywhere in America and the Big Mac is pretty much going to taste the same.
Yeah.
That's unnatural. That's not natural. When you travel to a different geographic region, the food should slightly taste different because of the impact of the local
just
environment. Yeah, just the water alone. That should make the breads taste slightly different.
Well, that's why Coca-Cola tastes different almost every time zone.
Right. It should. It's supposed to. And these are the things that this unnatural corporate culture has made people accustomed to, and then they don't want to travel elsewhere because then that breaks their sense of comfort. Like, if somebody goes somewhere now, all of a sudden the bread tastes different because of the water, they don't want to do that, so they go to McDonald's. This is where you get Americans traveling to other countries going to fucking McDonald's to eat, where you're like, why would you go to France or Spain to only eat at McDonald's? It's one thing to, I'll eat there when I'm abroad, but not every meal. And you get, like, I was in India on a bus, and there was these dudes complaining about not being able to find hamburgers. I'm like, you went to a country that holds cows fucking sacred and you're complaining about not being able to find hamburgers? Are you serious? And that's when I was like, Americans are the fucking worst, man. Like really, 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 being upset and so disconnected that you're complaining about not being able to find a fucking hamburger in India. And that's when it hit me where, what ends up happening is travel is almost restricted to the upper class people now. Like, if you're middle or lower class, you don't get to travel as much, unfortunately. And then what ends up happening is, if you go to an airport, you're going to see a lot of the same looking people. It's really weird how much everybody at the airport is like, it's the same class of people, and it's like,
I think that the people who travel a lot by plane have similar physiques and activity levels.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that every time I've traveled is that the airport culture seems to, they're the people who try to eat right. Then they're the people who are like, fuck it, I'm just gonna eat this fucking juicy, grease dripping, from the breakfast boutique. And you can tell when you're waiting at the terminal, and it's like, okay, I know what they ate. That's kind of an odd sensation, though. But I think that's also because airports are so sterile smelling.
Mm-hmm.
They all smell kind of the same.
Yeah.
Heavily filtered air, and then they all have the same magazines. They're all being published in the same, printing house.
Yeah.
They all have the same candy, wrapped up, whatever, edible stuff that's made in the same facility somewhere, and they just put a different sticker on it for the airport. They all have the same, it's the weirdest mall.
Well, and then on top of that, they overprice everything to the point where when they get you behind those gates and they have you hostage, they know they can charge you $4 for a fucking bottle of water. And then,
or the $5
like
Coke.
$17 for a ham and cheese sandwich. That's a day old.
The lettuce is wilted. The onion is chewy. The tomato is dry.
And I'm looking at it like, okay, I get this is capitalism, but how is this shit legal? How is this type of exploitation allowed when everybody knows it's happening? Like, everybody knows if you go into an airport, you're getting overcharged for everything from fucking gum to deodorant to like anything that you buy there. But just because it's there and you're in a spot where you need stuff, like, that is profiteering. And in many cases, it's illegal for other things. So why is it legal at an airport? Like, profiteering is not legal in every situation. There's specific places where profiteering is not legal in our economy. But it's weird what gets protected and what doesn't. Like, fucking insulin doesn't get protected from profiteering and price gouging. And I don't know. It's just
Epinephrine.
Yeah, I don't know.
Those EpiPen shots. Those things weren't protected from price gouging either. Well, I suppose recently the generic ones came out and they're like affordable, but even then.
But at the same time, what I'm getting at is, at what point did people decide it was okay for someone's health to be profited from? And in that, like, when our Bill of Rights is like the right to pursuit of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. When I have a situation in which the healthcare makes it so that most of my money and income has to basically go towards a potential day where I get sick or paying for insurance, so I can stay healthy, that does not feel like liberty to me. It feels like I'm being held prisoner by a system that is using the legal system to protect exploitation of me and my health, because they can't protect me and protect the profit. They're either protecting one or the other. So when they choose to protect the profit, I'm being exploited using the laws to protect their profit. And that is at the core exploitation of the citizens in favor of profit.
I feel like that's the thing that's wrong with or that would be like a violation of the Hippocratic Oath.
Of course, yeah, 100%. And this is where when the people that are doing it aren't doctors, they're pharmaceutical companies, they're pharmacists. Pharmacists aren't doctors. I don't think pharmacists have to necessarily take the Hippocratic Oath.
No, they don't. They're not doctors.
Yeah, so there's all these loopholes that then have been created to be like, oh, no, they're not violating the Hippocratic Oath. They're just giving you something that's going to make your life slightly better, that took subsidized research funds that actually came from tax dollars that went into a private organization. And now that we're going to say the private organization needs to recover their research funds even though they were subsidized. And they play these fucking games where then they try to use the idea of like money needing money for research as to why there's a profit motive, but then they forget to tell you that, oh yeah, those companies got subsidized for their research in the first place.
Yeah, and then they also got massive tax breaks once they released their data.
Oh, they forgot to tell you that part too.
And then they also got like some state financed the construction of a facility to manufacture that chemical process.
But they also influenced the people that did the research because they gave them the funding.
Yeah.
So whatever outcome that company wanted, that's what the researchers had to come up with, or else they wouldn't get the fucking money. Oh shit, we're in a circle now.
Well, that's like a commissioned art at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not art. It's a commissioned design, chemical design. It's commissioned chemical engineering.
Yeah.
They said, make us a chemical that does these things, that has these properties. Make it also, fight the common cold. Fight, not,
Well, and what's funny to me is like I'm trying to figure out if the common cold is something that was invented to make money, because when they break it down and they're like, oh, it's 1,000 different bacteria. Well, then it's not a fucking
common anything.
Yeah, there's nothing there. You're attributing common symptoms to a bunch of different things, and then saying that you can take this pill and it's gonna treat 1,000 different things. Something sounds like snake oil to me. Because what ends up happening is, what I personally, I haven't had a cold in probably 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Like an actual cold, because I realized what people were calling a cold is really inflammation and irritation. Whether it's in your nose, your upper respiratory, or like your sinuses, it's a combination of irritation and inflammation. So what ends up happening is, if you feel like you have a runny nose, you start blowing your nose, and your nose gets inflamed. Well,
yeah, because
now
you shed all the mucus in your sinus,
and then you keep blowing air through it, so it's actually irritating the skin to the point where it gets inflamed. Oh wait, now you feel like you have a stuffy nose because your actual nostrils have been swollen closed.
Yeah. So
you have the air passages that you can't breathe through. So then you blow your nose even harder. You try to get more mucus out, but you're inflaming them even more. You rub them raw, and now all of a sudden the top layer of skin's gone, and it feels like what is a cold is actually this process of irritation causing one to react and destroy the top layer, the epidermis, even more.
Yeah.
So what I do now, if I like have a stuffy nose, I sit upright and let my blood drain from my sinuses, and almost 90% of the time, within 5 minutes of sitting upright, my sinus is clear.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is if you sleep on one side,
Oh yeah, it all
the
drains
blood,
to one side.
all the blood drains into one side of your face, and your nostril actually swell up on the inside, on one side. So it feels like, oh, my left nostril's clogged. No, it's actually swollen. So then, if you sit up and let the blood drain out, it'll go away. But then people don't realize that that's what's happening, so they start blowing their nose. Then they need Robitussin. They need all these other things. They need the tissue with the lotion on it because their nose is irritated from all the blowing. So when I started trying to figure out like how much of this process is an actual cold and how much of it is me just destroying my body trying to like be comfortable from what I'm perceiving as symptoms of a cold, all of a sudden I would get symptoms for like maybe a day and then they'd be gone the next day. There's no 7-day cold. It's like if I get a sore throat, oh, it's probably because I didn't drink enough and was breathing dry air. So then if I take some ibuprofen and drink some water, next day it's usually gone.
Yeah.
And then it's not, there's all these things that are associated. Because then all the symptoms, like, if you're saying a cold can be a sore throat, itchy nose, fucking stuffy nose, sinuses, those are so completely different parts of your body that all of a sudden being able to say, oh, all of these things are one entity, then all of a sudden you can sell this panacea silver bullet and make people think that
the
they're
only
natural.
times I ever have been exposed to anything like for real is when I worked at a music store.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got a lot of kids running around, and that's really the only time because that's when most people are exposed to all the things.
Yeah.
When they're a child, when they're going to elementary school, and those are the only times I ever got really sick, when I was around a bunch of children. And I'm not complaining about that. It actually probably boosted the quality of my immune system by diversifying my white blood cell exposure.
Right. Well, I was gonna say, like, when I was traveling most heavy, I was clearly exposed to the most varied type of pathogens, and then trapped in a fucking tube, recirculating air with those pathogens. And what I would do is like, I would drink half orange juice, half apple juice because orange juice is so acidic that I realized that shit is like, the vitamin C is good, but the acidity also is too much. So if I started,
if it staves off scurvy, it's probably capable of keeping a lot of other things away too.
It can also start to destroy your skin.
That's true.
And
just
then
like a pineapple.
Exactly. So what I would start to do is I would start to try to tone down the acidity of the orange juice to get the vitamin C. Drink water with that, so I'm not getting dry. Like the dry air is another thing. So whenever I would travel, I still wouldn't get sick. So it's this thing where, like, in my head, all of the things that we've been told about getting sick are meant to make us think that we can buy something to fix it.
Yeah.
Because then, instead of just changing our behavior, which is it's the same shit with most things. If you could just change your behavior instead of buying something, some people would still prefer to buy it, but a lot of people would just change their behavior. But then, if you're put in a situation where you're made to think that changing your behavior is this really difficult thing because you work a 9-to-5 job and you got kids and you don't have time to change your behavior because you only have really like 5 minutes of free time a day, then all of a sudden getting stuck in that cycle makes it so that nothing to help your health that you would have to not pay for to change your behavior becomes attractive. Everything then has to be brought through that.
Well, I think we also have created this mechanism within our society where if it's free, you can just do it whenever you feel like it or have time. It's not really that important. It must not be important because it's free. But if you're spending money on it, hey, you had to earn that money. You had to work for it. That time is precious. Because that's what money is. It's time. It's the promise of time. We call it $1, but it really reflects, some portion of time that we've already committed or will have committed or, have spent doing something for something else.
And people don't see that. And what ends up happening is, if you frame it like that, then it's really easy.
It's a lot darker, actually.
No, it's not.
Like that.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's only dark if you then perpetually take the money over your personal enjoyment,
Well,
because then
I think that's that's kind of the observation is that
I mean, but
take the money.
people aren't looking at it like that. I believe,
Yeah.
unless they're just already shitty and like have no reason to live. Because that's what I'm saying. Like, if you look at it like that, then you're gonna be like, oh, should I take this extra $50 to go into work, or should I stay home with my family? Obviously, I'm gonna stay home with my family. And that's when people are like, oh, if I can work 20 hours a week and still do the same things and have more time with my family, the idea of working 40 hours a week to get this promised vacation with my family that never comes is all of a sudden less attractive. And that's where nobody is like being told to cut down on their purchases for more quality time. Like, it, we're told that the more you buy your kids, the more that they'll see that you put time and effort into getting them that thing, rather than the more time you spend with them, the more they'll appreciate that later. And it's like this notion of why we have fucking purchase nannies. Like, it's absurd to have somebody working so they can pay somebody else to raise their kid. Like, it sounds fucking stupid. It sounds real fucking stupid when I say it out loud. Like, the idea that I'm going to work, and because I'm at work, I'm making money so I can pay this other person to raise my child. That is fucking dumb. I don't care, like, who's listening to this. If you have to do it, I'm sorry. It's not your fault necessarily. But it's fucking dumb to have... well, if it's a one-parent home, that's not the same thing. But if you have two parents in a home, both of them are leaving, and then they pay somebody else to raise their kid.
That's that person's child.
Fucking
Exactly. Whoever raises that child
not your kid
becomes
anymore.
their parent.
That's not your kid. It's not your kid. And that's why they resent you when they grow up.
They're laying a foundation that the parents, the genetic contributors could never build upon.
Mm-hmm.
They're dealing with somebody else's foundation.
Them and the media that the kids are watching while they're not there too.
Oh yeah.
Which to me, again, this is where the family unit was, in a lot of places, able to take up that slack where the grandparents watching the kids or somebody, and you're not necessarily paying somebody. It's like somebody in your family. But now we're at a point where grandparents can't, they have to work jobs too, so they can't fucking watch the kids either. Yeah, it's real weird, I guess. Like, I'm just trying to figure out how many Americans want something different. Because what it comes down to is you have to want this in some manner.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people will revolt. They're revolting in Lebanon. They're revolting in fucking Spain. They're revolting in all over the planet. Like, there's not revolts here. People can call it revolts. When you boo the president when he shows up to a UFC, that's not a revolt. No. What are you doing? You're like, people who boo the president are sad. If you're not gonna talk shit, if you're not gonna tell him like some real shit that's actually don't fucking boo somebody. That's just weak.
It's like that episode of The Simpsons where he's like, "What are they saying?" But there's no, and he's like, "They're saying boo earns, yeah, boo earns." He's like, "Yes, very good, very good." Like,
because then I'm like, I don't know if you saw that shit at the event. Like, people were booing and some people were cheering. Oh, you mean in a polarized society, in a two-party system, so, half the people support and half the people against? Oh, how crazy!
Here's what I noticed: there were numerous videos of a person in a group of people booing, but they were essentially like, however many people one phone can hear in an arena where everyone's making noise, and there's a bunch of pockets of it.
Yeah.
And then there were just as many fan samples of everyone like
exactly,
adulating.
I was watching it in real time.
It wasn't what I saw of like the actual, like wrap up analysis or talking points or whatever that happened afterwards.
It's all exaggerated.
Yeah,
all
I
exaggerated.
heard was like a crowd like the clamor of a crowd, the cacophony of a crowd. It wasn't a distinct. It's not like it wasn't like in the '90s when the Braves had that chant that you could hear an entire like stadium chanting.
No,
It
dude.
wasn't like that at
No.
all.
Here's
was
the
like
thing.
it was just noise.
Dude, I can tell you, I can give you an example that will prove it was nothing, because in a recent event, Colby Covington came in during one of the fights, and everybody in the fucking arena started booing, to the point that the broadcast had to stop and start talking about it, because they were like, it had nothing to do with what was going on in
He
the
just
octagon.
walked in there and
everybody in the entire arena started fucking booing. So when you're watching it, you're like, why is everybody booing? That shit didn't happen when Trump came in. It did not happen.
Yeah.
So I don't like the dude, but for all the news outlets that are saying that shit did not happen. It literally didn't happen.
Well,
the way that they were saying it.
You know, we can reflect on the history of UFC and just organized fighting in general in the mixed martial arts, and there was a time when none of this stuff had very much support, and Donald Trump's facilities were made available to UFC and to some of the other,
So he's got a history with them.
He's got a history with them. He's been a part of UFC. He's like Vince McMahon is to WWE.
Yep.
Like
he really is. He really is.
He's part of that whole microcosm because he helped facilitate those fights. He had a fight on the out front of one of his giant hotels.
Yeah.
Like on the street.
So here's the thing. You have to acknowledge that. You have to acknowledge that. And my thing is, it makes you more objective to acknowledge these things. Because then, what I'm saying is, as someone who was watching the event go down in real time, not only did they not boo him, it was when Derek Lewis got on the mic and was like, shout out to the president, I know things aren't going well in the White House now, but you got to turn that shit around. People cheered. Now, all that said, it totally felt like Caligula or some fucking Roman emperor sitting in the Coliseum while the fucking country is burning down.
I think it's Nero.
So, yeah.
Nero burned Rome.
I mean, but I'm saying, like, in the sense of, like, how it's going down.
I think Good King Bill was Caligula.
I mean, you know, all of the fucking... all of the...
They're all analogous.
They all apply in some manner.
Yeah.
When he's going out and grabbing people's pussies, he's Caligula.
That's true.
Because that's what Caligula did. He's like, oh, you're a senator's wife? Grab her by the pussy.
Yeah.
That's Caligula.
Yeah.
So, I'm saying in the sense of, when this dude's up here
you're right.
on a weekend, he's got 4 years of this. My thing is, if you got 4 years to do a job, you don't take a fucking weekend off. He took a weekend off to sit here and watch the gladiators. Rome is burning. That's what that shit felt like to me. So I don't like the dude. I'm not going to sit here and support the dude. I'm not going to sit here and say, like, I have any sort of inclination to support the dude. But they didn't boo him the way that the fucking media was saying. That's absolute bullshit. And then, the fact that he was there, Rome is burning. Rome is on fire.
I think the thing that bothered me the most is that it somehow... the fight wasn't about the fights. It was about the crowd, a few people in the crowd having their moment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that everyone gets 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. So that's it.
Yeah.
Some people use their 15 minutes right there to be a tiny voice out of an arena on a pay-per-view fight.
Yeah.
Wow. Like that's.
And I guess my thing is like, okay, here's my thing. Love him or hate him, if this person is in the highest office of our nation and he's taking time out to go be with the people in some capacity, like, why would you go out of your way to ruin that for someone else? And then on the other hand, he does this all the time. Like, I guess it's weird to see the left do the same shit that they were condemning the right for doing when George Bush was in office. Like, the left wing has lost its fucking collective mind, and they're sheeping out hardcore in a way that I never expected or anticipated. Because then I'm like, between all the Russia shit and supporting Hillary Clinton, there's a lot of like forgiveness of crimes and unethical behavior that the left wing does if somebody says they're a Democrat, and then they will ignore minority plight while trying to push like, oh, indigenous populations in Brazil or climate change, blah blah blah. I'm like, I'm fucking I'm a second class citizen in my own country. The Democrats are not doing jack shit about that right now. The Republicans are fucking racist as fuck, so I'm not expecting them to do it. But the Democrats are sitting there and trying to like do all this other shit before they get the stops to cop killing black people.
Did you hear about the Dakota pipeline that broke?
Yeah, yeah, but
That's not even on the news cycle right now.
It's not, but you can sure believe when it was the big issue, the fucking left wing was like, oh, we're going to be supporting this until the day we make sure it gets stopped. It didn't get stopped. It's fucking leaking oil. And now they moved on to some other shit with Leonardo DiCaprio and Greta Thunberg that they're not going to see to completion. Meanwhile, black people are still getting killed. So they're supposed to sit here. I'm supposed to sit here and vote for them just because the other side's racist? Just because the other side's racist?
When you think about the kind of money that gets raised when a celebrity gets involved in any kind of social action, it's almost as like they get enough money together to create a trust that will keep like an office running. Mm-hmm. And the office's real role is to get people to sign up so they can be on a mailing list. So they can be part of the
super PAC.
Yeah, the super PAC.
Put money in. That's all it is.
It's
all
just
a big fucking.
It's just a big funnel.
It is, and that's what I'm looking at all this shit now, and I'm like, I'm not about to let the left wing use my race and right wing racism to bully me into supporting fucking Joe Biden, who's fucking also racist. Yeah. Fuck Joe Biden, and fuck like. I'm so fed up with the left wing right now.
What's his name?
I'm so fed up
out.
with the left.
I've been seeing these headlines are like
Beto, whatever the fuck.
How his campaign collapsed. And it's like, what? His campaign collapsed?
He should never been running in the first place.
Really?
Fuck that dude. Fuck that dude too. Kamala Harris, fuck her too.
My understanding is that when you run for president, you're actually supposed to make some money. And if you can't keep making money, then how can we expect them to do anything, right?
Yeah.
When was the last time we had presidents elected on like their ideas and not how much money they could be making?
I mean, did that ever happen?
Did that ever happen?
I don't think it ever happened, to be honest. I feel like people will act like that shit happened, but I don't think it ever happened. I don't know if that really happened.
I feel like to gain any kind of education, and like if we look back towards the cradle of our society here, I think even to become educated enough to qualify, you basically had to end up going to law school, just to be able to engage in politics at that high of a level.
Oh yeah.
And so we're talking about people who had access to. Institutions, so they had to have money.
They were already elite.
Yeah, they were already elite.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about like normal people don't just rise up from the dirt. The whole idea that like Bill Clinton, I mean, I drove by his house once when I was driving a car from Texas to Indiana. I stopped in Arkansas and checked it out. The site. It's like, wow, that's some humble origins, but that's like. He gained access to a lot of institutional wealth. That's the only.
When you have pictures of somebody as a teenager shaking hands with the president.
That's what I mean. He gained access to institutional wealth in a way that's like, that doesn't happen.
No.
That just doesn't happen.
You get chosen for that shit. You get chosen for that shit, and my thing is, what I believe is what they do is
It's a variation of grooming.
Exactly. They groom like 100 or maybe 200 people, and then they document their lives enough so that when it comes to election time, they can throw back to these pictures of them shaking hands with presidents and having photos taken with governors. Because I have that shit in my life too. Like, and I'm looking back on it. There's times when I'm, a kid, getting my picture taken with like William Hudnut and Evan Bye, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, why the fuck am I here as like a 6-year-old? Why am I standing on this chair next to William Hudnut getting my picture taken, and then getting like letters from the fucking senator's office and the governor's office and the mayor's office, addressed and signed to me, thanking me for coming to this event. Only when I eventually met George W. Bush later at a fucking random function, I'm like, this is weird. This is like a weird photo op, because he came to a church in Indianapolis and spoke there in like, what was it? It must have been 2000. No, it must have been 99 maybe. Either late 99 or like early 2000. It was before the election, before 9/11. Because I just remember being like, what is this racist ass dude doing in like a black church? And then, because my perception of him at the time was like George W. Bush, the governor, like this dude who was like, he was still like the fucking C student. Because at the time, they had framed him as this dumbass party kid who got through college with C's, and like the way he was presented, I was like, what is this racist ass dude doing here?
When we were going to IU, I remember meeting somebody who said his dad went to school with Jeb, and how George would always show up on the weekends with like bags of weed and coke.
Yeah,
and it's like
that's real shit.
That's fucking awesome.
It is, man. It is. So that's where I'm like, on the one hand, there's like so much shit about these people that you're trained to hate them because of being team opposition.
Yeah.
But then when you're in the room with George W. Bush and he's just sitting there feeling awkward and he's just sitting there looking around, room full of black people, and you're like, why the fuck is this dude here? But he's there, and he's like, it makes you question like all the shit that you're told about these people. Because that's why I'm like, I've been in a room with George W. Bush before he was president and interacted with the dude. He was a nice guy, fucking not anything near what they portrayed him out to be. But then there's a whole bunch of cameras in there. So that's where, like, looking back at that shit, that's where, to me, I see myself in a spot where I'm like putting my experiences in there. And it's like, easily, I know there's a file on me for whatever reason. Like, whether it's the shit I post on Facebook or what. But it's not about me being narcissistic. It's like, these things happen. So for me to act like, oh, you can be groomed for some shit. Because what ends up happening is, now Alex Jones realizes he was a agent of misinformation. Like, all these things that he's been saying were being fed to him, and he didn't realize it until very recently. So, like, the Bohemian Grove thing where he broke in, they let him in. They fed him that shit. Because what ends up happening is, if you have this dude, Alex Jones, who's out here believing this government conspiracy, believing in the Illuminati, pushing all this stuff, all of a sudden you have this dude who's gonna get people to believe him and saying how powerful these people are. Now everybody else is gonna believe it. If they weren't actually that powerful, now people are gonna believe they are because of this fucking show they put on for this dude. So what ends up happening is, the easiest way to make somebody believe something is to isolate them and put on a show around them that's believable. Like, you see it on prank shows, and you see it in a way where nobody understands what could happen if that was taken to a different level.
Yeah.
Like, if Alex Jones was put in a spot where the government is like, we're going to turn this dude into our misinformation agent. We're going to feed him all this stuff. We're going to do this conspiratorial shit around him. It's going to be like millions of dollars worth of effort put into it. But this is a show that we're doing to get this dude thinking this shit's going on a global level. We just have to do it to this one dude, and he'll do the work for us. And then, it sounds conspiratorial, but that's what Alex Jones is saying now, is what happened to him. So I'm not making this shit up. Alex Jones is now saying a lot of the stuff that he was saying was stuff that was a show put on so he would go tell other people.
When you said millions of dollar operations, I thought, oh, that's a really good deal.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's like a
It
low
is.
ball number,
Yep.
actually. I mean, if we're talking about creating a propaganda organization that's feeding what appears to be credible journalistic input to a a source that can broadcast on their own platform, that's that's heavy duty.
Yep.
But it's also not, if it's not that expensive, then why not? Because it saves the government money.
And it disconnects them
I mean,
from the message.
that's a borderline clandestine operation.
That's how they do it.
Be-
And this is so.
because
My
all they got to do is set up their own like media outlet and sell ad space, and have a few legitimate journalists write articles for it, and have a few photographer pools that they select from regularly because these people have access to events or whatever. So they create like an actual organization, but then they have that way they have like an immediate conduit to present information, and if it's consistently reliable in the eyes of the guy with the bullhorn, because he speaks loud. He's got quite the reach. It's actually kind of incredible. There are there are a lot of people in like talk radio who I think have managed to create incredible, you know, I'm not sure if it's live syndication, I guess. Some of those networks are just unbelievably impressive, and the agreements that they have to all come to make it work.
yeah.
That's pretty serious business. But I also understand that a lot of the radio stations have been purchased by a few companies, so it's all conglomerates now.
Yeah, pretty much. I think what was it? It's the same thing with visual media, and I think it's like, well, I bet it's less now. At one point, it was like 6 organizations own pretty much all the stations,
Well,
but I think it's more like three
in
or four
terms
now.
of,
'Cause Disney bought
I was just
Fox.
looking this up the other day, to set up a radio station, and this is if you can get permission from the FCC, and they don't just let people grab open bands, but if you can get through that stage, and we're talking like $100,000 maybe to get through the licensing process. You've got to build a facility. You've got to erect a tower. A tower can cost up to $100 million to erect, like the whole system, and then you're throwing more money into hardware, and then you've got to provide electricity to this thing, and you've got to have all your software systems. At a point like, and this is to actually have like a really powerful antenna, so you can access a communications array of satellites, so you can actually engage in real communications. Like, we're talking a lot of money, and that's the kind of thing that only really huge corporations can absorb at this point.
Yeah, and this, once those legislative barriers that are also cost prohibitive barriers get put in place, and in the industry, it makes it so that the only way to get in is being a big corporation.
And I'm not talking about like low powered FM for like.
No.
I'm talking about actual
Like an
radio
actual radio
communications
station,
so you can get to the satellites, so you can distribute from there, and then from there, radio stations that want to pull your signal, they can just like pay the licensing, then they tune their system in to grab that signal, and then they distribute that locally on the ground, on the terrestrial side. And so that's like, it's still an expensive thing to do, to engage in that kind of communication. And that's like full blown, like real serious.
I mean, but technically it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be,
Yeah.
but it is. It's like that's the way they've made it.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be this way.
No, it didn't have to.
We didn't have communications satellites 50 years ago, 60 years ago, like at the same level that we do now.
And at the same time, like,
You've also got to be really far away from everything, because those things are like,
yeah, super powerful.
Melt your fillings. Speaking of melting your fillings, last night I made a vindaloo enchilada fusion. So I made these corn tortilla enchiladas, and I mixed vindaloo sauce with ground beef and potato and onion and garlic, and then filled the things up, then poured the sauce on them, and then just set it in the oven for like, God, it must have been like an hour and 20 minutes. But they came out, and they were fantastic. 375 degrees for an hour and 20 minutes, then 15 minutes at 400 degrees. And they were incredible. Because it had this, like, distinctly not enchilada flavor behind it. It was very distinctly like a curry, like an Indian curry. But texturally, it was like a, enchilada.
Nice.
It was successful. I'm gonna have to do it again sometime.
Interesting to mix flavors and textures and all that.
Yeah. Well, I had this can of enchilada sauce, but it's like called for more ground beef than I had, so I was like apprehensive. But then I looked at the curry, the vindaloo sauce jar. I was like, this might work.
Yeah, I've had a curry pizza. It was pretty delicious.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting flavor.
Well, naan's like a flatbread. It's kind of like a thin crust. So.
Yeah, pretty much. But it was delicious for sure.
That sounds pretty good. There was a place on the square several years ago, and they made some good food, but it was basically like a cafeteria where they served it into a styrofoam plate and hand it to you, and it's like it kind of reveals like that's the truth of most of Indian cuisine is that it takes a while to prepare. They prepare a lot of it.
Yeah.
It's a cafeteria experience at that point. And that's kind of messed up. And then the really serious ones, like I don't know if it's still there. There was an Indian restaurant downtown on Kirkwood for a long time. And if you would go there, they would prepare, really cool stuff, like fancy dishes in strange ceramic pots. And it would take hours. Like you'd order it and you better be prepared to be there for like 3 or 4 hours for certain dishes. But it would come out and you'd order other things, and you'd be like eating and having conversations, of course, because you don't just order something like that and wait.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
It's like, I'll wait for it. I brought
take
a book
or something. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know how much you've caught up on the Crisis on Infinite Earths. I know you said you caught up on Supergirl.
Oh yeah, I'm like completely. I've watched every episode of Supergirl at this point.
Yeah.
I completed that yesterday afternoon, and then I got caught up in Titans.
Oh shit. Yeah. So Titans.
Titans just got really serious.
Yeah. Titans.
Like
is fucking,
holy shit, serious.
Yeah. I feel like that's
their
a
version
good
of
topic.
Slade is so
Spot
good.
on.
He's so
Spot
good.
on.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's like when he and Robin
Jericho too.
Yeah.
But
when he and Robin have that like samurai showdown in the church,
yeah.
that was so perfect. He's just like, it's like, your heart's beating too fast. You're out of control. That's what it's like you're too emotional. That's why you have no control. He just keeps whacking around in the room.
Yeah, I mean,
And he
I
has
feel
a
like,
fucking gun built into his staff too. Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? That's some
Yeah.
super samurai showdown shit. I can see one bullet, but he had multiple. That was so good.
Yeah, man, I'm loving, like, this is like the best time to be alive. I feel like as a kid I wouldn't have appreciated it, and if I didn't have the comic books as a kid to like
Imagine
build
these things.
Yeah, and not having it at the time as an adult, like, it wouldn't have been proper for a kid anyway. So now that I'm an adult, like, to see an adult version of like the Titans or Krypton or any of this stuff,
It just reveals that these stories have always been for adults.
Yeah,
and the adults who wouldn't take it seriously were essentially just revealing that they didn't have the imagination or desire to be imaginative about somebody else's story.
Yep. Well, or it's like the idea of, you don't need a superhero unless the villain's actually a villain. And when you're an adult, like, you can't have a villain that's like not killing people, or not like destroying stuff, because then it's not a real villain in the real world.
What's the Joker if he's only robbing banks and telling bad jokes?
Yeah, I mean,
that's not the Joker.
Yeah, and in that, when you're an adult in a real world where like people die and suffer horrible shit every day, you don't need to show it, but the villains have to actually be
I feel
above normal shit.
I feel
if
like
they're
the
super
Riddler,
villains.
a real like Riddler who would present a challenge to Bruce, would be some corporate dude, some corporate takeover guy, and he's really charismatic and charming, and can control the room and asks these questions that stump people to the point that he can just hypnotize them with his incredible intellect. And so it extends to this place where Bruce is even like, whoa, how do I even break this? How can I break through this? How can I get my boardroom back? It's that level of.
I think you're right. I think that's like where the whole riddle stuff is kind of played out.
Yeah, that would be his thing first. He'd ask really hardcore questions that made people think, and he would change the directions of.
But it would be an obvious answer.
Yeah, it should be obvious.
Well, yeah.
It'll be obvious
like
to the
once you hear the answer, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
How did I not see that?
So really, the goal for that storyline is to come up with like 5 consecutive M. Night Shyamalan level reveals to happen like in the first 20 minutes of the movie, so that everyone's like, I should be getting all this stuff, so they're really dialed in.
Yeah.
And then just have a character. So once the Riddler is shown up, once Bruce figures out how to show him up, that's when he loses his cool and decides to seek revenge on everything. And it just turns out that he's smart enough to figure out who Batman is.
Yeah. Even in that, I feel like one of the things about the Riddler is it should be an emphasis on the fact that he has no martial arts skills.
Yeah.
And it's always like 5 steps ahead of Bruce, so that
he doesn't need martial arts.
Exactly. Skills. So there's all these things
He's
about
super
the Riddler.
Smart. Like we haven't given the Riddler credit for his intellect.
No.
Like ever in the movies or even in the cartoons.
Gotham did.
Yeah.
And that's where I think Gotham has done the best iteration of the Riddler, because then they took away his intellect, and then you see like what he's like as an idiot, or just a regular person, because he's not a complete idiot. He's just a regular person, not super intelligent.
Yeah.
And that's it's the same shit with Lex Luthor, and that's where Supergirl.
So Lex Luthor and Supergirl, they did his character so well.
Yeah.
He's like, what would happen if Tony Stark was just a little bit smart? By little, I mean a lot smarter, a lot more intelligent, but not intelligent enough to have compassion.
Yep. And
because that was the only real difference. There were some things that Lex is just like, he wouldn't have gotten into so many of the problems the Avengers faced because he would have already seen it coming. He's like that smart about everything. And so his real shortcoming is that he just lacks compassion. He's a sociopath. There's no way around it. He's a super intellect. And I also like that show a lot because of Martian Manhunter. Because
Martian Manhunter is fucking.
They
nailed that iteration.
Oh god, he's so good. Like all the times when some kind of psychic attack, breaks through his defenses and they show him just collapse and he's like It's like that's exactly how that shit happens. He's not like completely invulnerable. He's tough as can be, but like he can go toe to toe with Superman if he wants to.
He's vulnerable to fire, right?
He's afraid of fire because
I think he's vulnerable to it though.
Oh yeah,
I know he's afraid of it, but I think it's because he's.
Well, and magnesium causes him to catch on fire. There's a limited range of like
he can't phase while he's on fire.
No.
Yeah, so there's fire does something to him.
Yeah.
So it's where he's like or maybe
I think it
makes his cells unable to phase, so then he's like vulnerable to being killed while on fire or something.
Yeah. There's a good it's like an early DC comic movie or cartoon movie, animated movie, where they show him at a bar just having a soda and some woman buys him a drink and it turns out to contain magnesium and he catches on fire. It reacts with his Martian blood and he goes and jumps in the water, but because it's magnesium that's on fire, it doesn't cause it to go out. It just has its own oxygen. And so he's freaking out. It's Doom. It's the one where Batman's protocols are used against the Justice League. Yeah. Because, of course, Batman would come up with a way to do that to his friends.
Yeah. Well, the reason... Okay, so what I was going to do, or what I was going to say is, like, they seem to be setting up Identity Crisis
Yeah.
in the Arrowverse, which is fucked if they go down that route, because they just brought in Sue Dearborn, who eventually becomes Sue Dibney, and gets fucking murdered.
Oh, wow.
Which they introduced a female version of Dr. Light. So Dr. Light exists in the Arrowverse, but not the one that kills Sue Dibney yet. So then they had the Dr. Light on Titans, which is fucking hardcore, and that's where I'm like, if they brought that level, like, I don't think they'll bring that level onto the CW. Like, there's no way they'll bring that hardcore. But if they're bringing
is Titans on CW?
No. It's
because
on
it's
DC Plus.
It's way too hardcore for TV.
God, no.
That has to be. That's like a subscription service
It
level
is,
thing.
it is.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Because
it's on DC's streaming service.
oh man, because I just remember, like, I think it was like 2 or 3 episodes ago. Like, I was watching it, and I thought, I was like, it occurred to me, like, then I was, in the middle, or I was trying to be up to date on season 2, and it's like, this is totally inappropriate for broadcast television.
Oh God!
Holy shit!
Yeah.
This is like almost inappropriate for like Netflix and Hulu.
Mm-hmm.
What the?
Yeah.
It like finally occurred to me, just like what kind of show we were watching. It doesn't matter if they're wearing armor or plates or spandex.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and what's
it's
supposedly
such a
happening
serious,
is
it's like it's one of the most heavy shows that they have.
wait for it. Supposedly, this might be setting up a Justice League Dark.
That's awesome. They need to do that.
Yeah. So if they set up a fucking Justice League Dark that's actually using the Bruce Wayne and the fucking Deathstroke and Aquaman,
They can have like interaction with Blade.
Yeah.
No, they can't.
I mean.
Or what's that guy? It's like a vampire dude. I can't remember. Crap. Erdogan. That's the demon guy.
Oh yeah. Well, because they brought he's in
because he's like got that flaming sword, and he's always like rhyming weird shit.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
He's like
my
Legends, I think.
He is?
Yeah. He was on a couple episodes.
Huh.
Yeah, because they have like the dude who changes into him. I'm pretty sure it was Legends. But yeah, he like rhymes and everything on there.
Yeah, that's probably. He's always like. He's always rhyming things with like the outcome, and it always like times perfectly when he like knocks.
I feel like season 4 maybe.
Okay.
He's only in there for a couple episodes.
He and Constantine have this like incredible history together.
Yeah.
Like Constantine's always like, "Hey man, you got to come help me." He's always come up with some rhyme while he doesn't want to.
Well, that's funny. I thought that was not for CW, but it's interesting that they actually made Constantine bi on this show, where you're like, they actually do things in even on the CW universe where you're like, okay, this is like more believable in a live action version, because one of the big plots was that one of the reasons Constantine is cursed is because he accidentally sent his gay lover to hell.
Yeah.
When he was trying to catch a demon or some shit.
I think I remember seeing that Legends episode.
Yeah.
Well,
they did like a whole arc on it.
So when I was watching Legends, I remember seeing the Crisis, crossover episode where they're like, it's like, none of this makes sense, and so I went and found the other Crisis episodes that correlated. So I saw the wedding on Supergirl, and I forgot that I'd seen it.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, oh, this is holy shit, holy crap. It's not. I mean, it's obvious because some of the characters are lesbians,
Mm-hmm.
or they're bisexual, or they're gay. It doesn't matter. It's like, but they weave it into the story like it's normal.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. It's
Well,
not.
it's because the producer
deal.
of the Arrowverse is gay.
And I think that's really
Or the creator.
that's
of the
fantastic
Arrowverse.
that they do that, because they're normalizing this thing that shouldn't have to be normalized.
Yeah.
But it
does.
but for some reason people need to be reminded.
But they're also doing it in a way that's not overt and
Yeah.
not heavy-handed, because
Yeah.
then that's where there was even there's uproar.
What I thought was amusing is like I had forgotten that these characters that they show connecting at this wedding, or like it's like, oh yeah, they're both coming out of these relationships. And then it reminded me of that whole series of episodes that led up to it on Legends, when like the director of the Time Bureau and what's her name, the leader, the chick who's
Canary.
Yeah, like, you know, their thing falls apart, and then Supergirl's sister and her police officer friend's thing falls apart. But then at the wedding, they're like both like not wanting to be a part of the crowd, so they're off the side drinking, and then they're like, we should drink together. We should go drink ourselves under this table together.
Yeah. Now there was an uproar at one point when people were like mad that Supergirl wasn't a lesbian.
Why does she need to be?
She doesn't. And in fact, Supergirl needs to be asexual.
Yeah.
And that's what they like. She's hetero in the show, but what they allude to is you're not allowed to have a love life.
Yeah.
And as a super person, period. Yeah. Like Superman, like he ends up fucking up a lot because of his shit with Lois.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is
weakness.
Yeah. So that's where the Injustice storyline. I don't think a lot of casuals even know the Injustice storyline exists. Like ultimately, Lois will die at the hands of a villain. Like that's what happens when a super person decides to have a love life, and that's the one thing that they've done well about with Arrow.
I think that the only person that can get away with killing Lois is the Joker. And then Superman has to kill the Joker.
Yep.
Like, that's the only way it can go now.
And then Batman has to fucking go after Super.
Yeah.
And that's like, it has to go in that order.
That's the only way it can happen.
Yeah. And it's like, it's built into that universe.
Yeah.
And this is kind of, again, where...
Because nobody's crazy enough to do that except for the Joker.
Yeah, but that's also why Supergirl can't have a lover.
Yeah.
It's like... There are these godlike people in this universe.
Well, that was funny. Is like her boyfriend, the Mon-El character.
Oh, he was terrible.
Well, it was funny because like when she does get a boyfriend, he's actually he ain't no slouch, but he's still weak compared to her.
He's the damsel in distress.
They
totally flipped it.
He's like the boyfriend who's like he's cool and all, but she's carrying all of his shit, and it's not a problem. And he's like struggling to.
Well, and that's why I thought it was ridiculous that people got mad that she had him instead of being a lesbian, because when they gave her a boyfriend, they totally made him a damsel in distress, and Kara was the one that was like the powerful one in the relationship. They totally made the dynamic where it was like, guess what, man, step aside, the woman's got it. So then, like, to not celebrate that in storytelling, to then be like, well, should have been a lesbian. It's like, man, you guys are missing like the big fucking kick in the patriarchy's balls. Like,
this show's so good.
Because then Mon-El's mom was the one that wore the pants too.
Yeah, she was
Kevin fucking Hercules didn't say he was like the bitch.
Kevin Sorbo got shanked.
Yeah, Kevin Sorbo.
Hercules got shanked.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, man.
They delivered it so well. Yeah, they brought Terry
Hatcher on, who's clearly a fucking callback, obviously, to then be the queen.
Well, they got what's his name?
Dean Cain.
Yeah, Dean Cain.
He's the father.
He's the Jeremiah Danvers. Like.
No.
So it's like.
Well, this is why
fantastic.
I love.
They did such a good job.
The Berlanti verse. Like they call it the Arrowverse, but I'm calling it the Berlanti verse because he didn't have to do that.
No.
He didn't have to get Dean Cain. He didn't have to get the fucking Flash from the '90s to be Barry's dad. You know what I'm saying? There's all this shit that he did.
Yeah.
That now that we get the fucking Crisis.
It's like well played.
It's like well played. One of the things that they're banking on people forgetting is that Flashpoint happened. So technically, we're not even in the main universe anymore.
It's all been split up.
Yeah. So I think they're banking on people forgetting that Flashpoint happened.
I'm maintaining that they're gonna tie it all back together with Green Lantern. They're gonna resurrect Green Lantern because Green Lantern's been shelved for several years. Like they're gonna pull Green Lantern out. And it's going to correct everything. They'll have to figure out how to tie the Watchmen into it.
Yeah, well, I don't think you're far off because there's rumors of Diggle being a Green Lantern from a different planet and coming in and playing the John Stewart one.
That would make sense.
Like, from like Earth 34 or whatever.
Yeah. Well, no, it would be Earth. It would be the... it would be the original. It would be the Alpha Earth
timeline.
Well,
no, but he's Diggle in the Alpha Earth. because he was
No,
like,
I mean like there would be like they'd have to introduce some kind of sub-layer where Doctor Manhattan
oh yeah, yeah.
doesn't let the
I don't know if they're
guy
gonna bring
die.
Manhattan in this one.
Well, there's a Watchmen show.
No, I know. I'm saying in this universe,
He doesn't have to
like
exist in their
it may not
universe.
happen yet.
Yeah.
And this is like pre-Zero Hour.
So
Because, like, what I'm getting at is the way they're doing the trajectory. Like, this is still, like, there's still a possibility that in the future for this storyline they do bring in Dr. Manhattan because of the way they're doing it. Because Green Lantern is the one who resets it the first time.
Yeah.
Well, not the first, it's like the second time.
Green Lantern is he's the key to all the things.
Yeah, the Zero Hour.
And and they've already forecast Limelight. She's going to be the new Lantern, and will overcome fear. They're going to try and kill all the old guard. Most of them are going to die. It'll actually be a good story. That's my prediction.
Wait, where was that Limelight at?
She's like I think she's a time traveler.
In which show though?
Justice League, the cartoon.
Oh well, because
that's usually where they introduce characters, and if they develop, they tend to get moved up in the pantheon.
Right, because I feel like I saw
because they're running her concurrently with the John Stewart Lantern. There's a bunch.
Well, because that's right. In her future, she becomes Limelight.
Yeah.
And they like are putting her on the path to gain her.
Yeah, because they know that.
Yeah, that's right. I just watched that one recently. It's like it's not Justice League Dark. It's it was like 2017, one of the cartoons.
Yeah, it's I can't remember the name of it. It's like one of the newer Justice
Maybe
League
it's
movies.
War. It might be Justice League War.
No, that's older.
Oh.
That's the one with Darkseid kicking everyone's ass.
Yeah.
Where they have the jock Superman, not the intellect Superman, and they've got Green Lantern like being defiant and like not understanding Bruce's plan, and they have Bruce not telling anybody what the plan is, just telling him what to do. So it's like an awkward Justice League movie.
Mm.
And I can't remember when it's before Flashpoint Paradox came out, so. But it's also around the time they started like having weird movies where it's just like just Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, or it's just certain portions of Justice League. So it's all after Infinite Crisis at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, man, the fact that they're doing the Crisis on the TV is fucking insane.
That's the only way that they could do it, because
no, not in a movie. Yeah,
No,
it would never work in a movie.
like,
God no.
It's like, I feel like it's like maybe 7 or 8 Infinity, well, MCUs, 10 years. It'd be like 20 years of nonstop movies, and we would never actually get to see it all, because who has time to sit down for like.
Well, and this is where I think there's casuals who still think the MCU is like the paragon of comic book storytelling on screen. Fucking Berlantiverse, hands down, man. Like, I don't care if MCU has better special effects. Like, the Berlantiverse is doing something that is completely unprecedented with storytelling in a way that they're staying faithful to the comic material and the television material at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know how that's possible, but they fucking did it.
No,
they're bringing in Batman 66.
They've got a level of continuity that
Into the Spider-Verse is closest thing that Marvel's done. Like, out of a Marvel property.
Yeah.
But there's nothing else that's even close as far as like tying, like the way that they're weaving everything into this. Fucking Brandon Routh returning as Superman. Like, I mean,
I just want Batman Beyond. because I want to see
Batman
Kevin Conroy.
Beyond, for fuck's sake.
I want to see Kevin Conroy be Bruce Wayne. I want to see his old ass be Bruce Wayne, like telling Terry what to do. Like, Terry, behind you.
they are successfully taking nostalgia and reinventing nostalgia into something that's going to create nostalgia all over again because it's new now. Like, this is, I can't even express how much the Berlanti-verse is transcending all forms of media with its storytelling in a way that it's just unprecedented.
Well, I think that what we're witnessing is that television has actually come of age.
Yeah.
Television is able to approach movie cinematography levels of production, and they don't often do it because the kind of stories that are being told are inside small rooms, and even when they're in a big room, they tend to frame it a certain way because that's the way the comics were drawn.
Right.
And so it's kind of interesting. I feel like the Marvel movies are this attempt to create that kind of story in the Disney universe.
Yeah.
And so they're following a lot of Disney formats, so it looks huge and it looks beautiful. I mean, it's gorgeous, but it's also not. It's not the same. They're deviating because they want to put their own little twist on. They want to put their Imagineers on the case and put them to work and come up with ways to make it more fantastic than it needs to be. And I'm not saying that it doesn't need to be fantastic. It's beautiful. It's incredible.
Oh, fuck yeah.
But there are also times where I feel like we're not getting a story. We're getting a presentation of how good their effects and rendering departments are.
And in that, it's like what they're doing to try to make it appear that they're creating long form is actually making short form.
Yeah.
And that's why, to me, it's like when you reference the source material, the Berlanti verse is way closer to the source material than the MCU is to its source material.
Yeah.
And that's like because it's more long form and can get in the intricacies that, like, down to duplicating specific shots from different series over the course of like different seasons.
Yeah.
Like on Arrow, they had an episode where in an alternate universe they restarted the story. I think it's in this season. But on the very first,
God, how many seasons of Arrow are there?
I think 7. It's either 7 or 8. But on the very first episode, they start the story over in this universe.
I watched that right to the point that he killed Ra's al Ghul, and then I had to stop because like I knew that it was about to get really serious, but I didn't want to be piecemealing it.
Right.
And I hated that shit, and I never picked it back up, and then I forgot about it.
I think you dropped off at like the wrong time because that's when shit like real.
I know.
Like,
I knew it was about to get serious, but I was caught up, and I couldn't. I hate waiting a week between episodes. That's like bullshit. So like
with these CW stories, like sometimes you have to force yourself through like maybe even an entire first season before it like picks up. So with Arrow, I never liked Green Arrow. He's never one of my favorite characters. But what I do is I give my childhood self the satisfaction of watching these shows, saying like, hey, this wasn't available when you're a kid. Fucking watch this because you have the chance. So then what happens is...
He's alright. Arrow's alright. He's like... He can hang with Bruce.
I mean, he's better than Hawkeye, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
But...
No, he's a good secondary high-level character.
But they made him interesting by bringing him down into the darkness, and he's a murderer when you're first introducing to him, and he's not a hero.
I mean, in the comics, towards the end of what was it? Eventually, he loses an arm.
Mm-hmm.
And
they allude to that in the series.
Yeah,
he's got the robotic arm.
Yeah,
in the future.
In the future, he's got a stump at some points, and he's still just as dangerous. He can shoot with his one arm in his mouth.
And they do that in the series.
Or he'll grab the bow with his foot and pull the thing and just shoot it off his shoe. And dude he's capable of leading the League of Shadows, League of Assassins.
Yeah, and he does that in the series too.
You know, it's like he's a bad dude.
That's what I was gonna get to.
He's a really bad dude.
In the series they put him on the trajectory where we get introduced to Raish and he does the League of Shadows stuff. But then back in the throwback or in the reset of how they start to introduce his storyline in the new universe, Batman also trained on the same island as Arrow. So it's like they're bringing it, like they have a shot where they show the mask, the bat mask, with an arrow through the hell, like the top of it, and it's like you don't see Batman, but you see his mask. So now they're doing all this shit.
Well, I mean, it's been a long time coming. If people hadn't figured it out, that they had always been set on the path as adversarial, that they were always supposed to fulfill the same role, that if one failed, the other would succeed, that they were actually agents of the League of Shadows or Assassins.
Yeah, they change it in like
they switch it up.
Yeah,
but like I think that that's the kind of thing that it helps to have that kind of once you realize that they're both just as capable of defeating Ra's al Ghul. They're of carrying the mantle of Ra's al Ghul. They can step into that anytime they want. They just don't want it because they're like mad about it. Bruce is like, you used me, so I'm gonna kick your guys' asses till the end of time, and Arrow's just like, you bastards.
Oh, and that's where, man, the Gotham Ra's is quite possibly the best Ra's we've ever had.
Yeah.
It looks just like somehow looks like the comics and the fucking cartoon.
Oh, the animated series Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah,
So fun.
yeah, but like they got, and his demeanor, everything about the Gotham Ra's al Ghul was fucking spot on.
Liam Neeson looked the part, but he didn't make me believe that he was Ra's al Ghul.
Nah,
he was Ra's al Ghul.
he's all right. Yeah,
he was okay.
Right.
He looked the part. He looked
Ra's al Ghul. Yeah, just didn't like. Should it
it's like guys, come on, just say his name right.
Yeah, right. Ra's al Ghul with the fucking Scottish accent.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Razal.
Ra's al Ghul. Like what? Yeah, I don't know.
He looked good for it, but they should just they really need to find somebody someone who's like Persian or Turkish or somebody from the Middle East who's got like really sharp cheekbones.
And they knew they did it because they had the fake guy at first.
Yeah.
They knew that they shouldn't have had a white dude play Ra's. They knew that. They knew that. That's why they had the fucking fake
the fake Mongolian,
the
fake Tibetan warlord pretending to be Ra's.
Well, because that's what I'm like. I want to say Oriental because they're playing into all these stereotypes. It's like
he's not a rug.
I mean, but that's the point. That's the point. Yeah. It's like it's for the people who still call Asians Orientals. Like they think that this dude represents something, and he's just an amalgamation of stereotypes.
Okay, I'm just gonna say this one time. Oriental describes a product. You can have an Oriental rug. You can have an Oriental carpet. You can have an Oriental couch. You can have an Oriental dining set.
Yeah.
Oriental tea set. You know, that's classic.
No, I just watched an episode of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend where they have like the dude, he's Filipino. And the mom's
I haven't
like,
watched that show in a while. I thought
the
it was
mom,
really fun.
like the girl's mom calls him Oriental.
Yeah.
And then they go on this big spiel about how like it's a racist term, and that's why I'm like, people still use the term because they have this like there was a fetishization of Oriental like objects that then permeated culture, and then it like Orientalism started to then like seep into everything else. I
remember when I was younger hearing a parent say, you know, like at the end of the hall, like, you didn't tell me he was Oriental. And I was like, wait, what? I was born in New York.
Yeah.
That means I'm American.
But what I was getting at is that's why I wanted to say it in the first place. Because fucking Nolan knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
They knew what they were doing. There was like...
No, I actually really enjoyed that whole Batman, that version of Batman. I think that the way they did Scarecrow was really fun. I think that the way they did a lot of characters was really well executed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way that they told like the Dark Knight Returns was fantastic. I liked how at the end he was like, they're like, how did you do this to your body? He's like, oh, you know, jumping out of helicopters and snowboarding down mountains and shit. It's like, yeah, 50-year-old Bruce should be doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that makes sense. That's why it's that story. Okay. Oh, they're gonna turn the gang leader and Bane into the same person. I guess that kind of makes sense. You know, that just condense all these elements of the story because Bane's actually a much more interesting character than the gang leader. The what were they called? I don't know, the mutants or whatever they were. But then Batman became the leader of the gang and saves Gotham.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Sons of Batman, right?
yeah, the Sons of Batman. And so like eventually we're going to get a version of Batman that we already kind of got in Batman versus Superman, which is kind of fucked up, where old Batman has to like put on a suit to stay alive so he can fight Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And they've already kind of given us that, and then they tied Doomsday into that, which was also bullshit.
Yeah, they. I still hope they release the Snyder cut. Of,
Oh, they
Justice
will.
League.
It'll happen the same way that we got every version of Blade Runner. It'll take 15 years, and
Yeah. Yeah, that universe could have gone.
you know that I think it was like yesterday. Blade Runner officially happened in the past.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I was saying the only thing that got predictions about future fashion were wrong is Predator 2. And they both happen to be set in Los Angeles. Yeah, people don't wear that much leather.
Whoa. Arnold's version of Total Recall might get fashion right then.
Yeah.
There's still a chance.
Yeah. Still yet.
But not that Colin, what's his name?
Colin Farrell.
Yeah, his version of Total Recall was very strange. I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, it didn't need to happen.
The Earth elevator thing was messed up.
Yeah.
That kind of was like, wait a second, I don't remember this, and like.
Well, I wonder half the time with a lot of these movies, like Total Recall still holds up. Don't reboot it, just re-release it in the theaters. If that's what you want, if you're trying to tell the story, just re-release it in theaters because it still holds up.
Or
on so many levels.
Well, let's see. There have been a few movies that have been made as shot-for-shot remakes of the original, and I think that that's actually the kind of thing that should be explored. If people really want to make a movie in the style of a movie from the '50s, but they don't actually know how to write stories like that, no matter how many scripts or screenplays or whatever that they've read and studied through all of their academic career, they weren't alive during that period of time, and so they don't have the same kind of cultural ingredients to put these stories together. The cultural tension's not there. The quality of the information age doesn't exist then. The things that they think of now are like as tropes would have been serious at some point then. And so I think that on some level, I think that the detective story needs to come back. We've got generations of detective stories that could be remade.
But it wouldn't work in modern times, and part of it.
I think that's part of the goal is to do it, to remake it, and try to make it like an actual shot for shot remake.
Well,
because
but
then
I was going to say,
but then because we're exploring an aesthetic at that point, and it's not about coming up with new story.
But I was going to say,
it's just
I don't know if you
thing.
realize how much of detective stories depend on not having cell phones or centralized databases.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of detective stuff is just, finding people that now you can just fucking Google them or look on Facebook. And a detective movie, half of that shit would be just on Facebook. Finding out information and stalking people. In modern times, if we're going to be, a real detective movie, because that's what private investigators do. That's the first shit they do now. If you're trying to find out information, what's their Facebook page? What if I Google this person?
No, I think they should make movies that are set in the 50s with 50s style. They should completely remake those stories if they want to tell detective stories. I'd like to see that. I would like to see war movies, where instead of trying to re-envision the story that we've seen, they do it. They try to limit themselves to what would have been available, kind of for that era. Not save the camera system and the audio recording systems and the lights, because you kind of need that. But they wouldn't have had the same kind of. Have you seen that terrible Alexander the Great movie with Angelina Jolie and Colin Farrell.
No, I definitely didn't watch that.
Yeah, well, don't watch it because you're not missing anything. But there's this one scene where they've got him riding a horse and he's wearing a helmet that's clearly a fucking like motorcycle helmet that they added a bunch of shit to make it look like it's a Macedonian war helmet thing, and or Mesopotamian, and no, I think it was Macedonian. I can't remember. Anyways, it made his head look like a bug, like a I can't remember the name of that Martian from the Flintstones. That would show up.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
You know, had that weird baseball helmet, motorcycle helmet looking thing.
Helmet with the antenna.
Yeah, well, it was kind of like that, except it was huge. Because I guess he didn't know how to ride a horse or something like that, or it was a really dangerous scene, but he insisted on doing it. So the agency was like, he has to wear a helmet. It looked terrible. But things like that that shouldn't have existed. Now we don't have to worry about that because they've got motion capture and CGI that's like almost imperceptibly. It's just so good. They've got hair down. They've got fire down. Fire can spread digitally now, and it looks real.
Yeah.
I think once they got things like fire and really nailed fluid dynamics to the point that they can make realistic water scenario after mapping a space, like.
Well, okay. I guess my thing is, as a viewer, like I'll take two examples: Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet and Stranger Things. Both of those things have contextual influence. So the Baz Luhrmann story is Romeo and Juliet in modern times, whereas Stranger Things is a new story in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, the way they did the 80s is perfect, and it also enhanced the way the story played out. Whereas if someone today was to like, I'm going to remake the Terminator and put it in the 80s, like, I don't know if I would feel inclined to watch that film instead of the original.
In Terminator Genesis, there was a segment that was portrayed in the 80s.
No. I'm saying if somebody was like, I'm gonna remake Terminator shot for shot and set it in the 80s, like, I don't know if I would feel the need to see the remake instead of the original, because if they made the remake shot for shot and set it in the 80s, it's like, what could then be different, and why should I? Like, what motivates me?
Oh, I think that something like Terminator would be a candidate for that kind of remake, at the point that our the way that we view the movie has fundamentally changed, and it would become more of an interactive experience, like a virtual reality experience. That would be the time that Terminator would be recreated shot for shot. That's the only.
I mean, but it's not the same thing then. If you're talking about that, that's a whole different form of media.
Well, I know.
That's a whole different.
I think that's like the nature of certain types of stories. Like something like Terminator is still almost it's contemporary at this point. The time traveling robot killing machine is a trope in of itself at this point. So for Terminator to progress without changing the story, it has to be about the presentation.
Right, yeah.
It's all about presentation.
And then it's an exercise about presentation, which then it's like, for the audience, then that's where it's like, how, like, if I was to say, if I had to pay $16 for this new experience with just a slight interpretation of visuals, like, why would I do that instead of going and watching the old one for free or whatever, like. And this is where
that's where it's up to the technology to deliver some kind of experience that we have some heightened adrenal response.
Yeah.
Or there's a way to do it so that you can press a button on your remote and you can have Terminator vision and watch the movie from the perspective of the Terminator. And it sucks because it's red, but whatever, you get to be the Terminator, and you just watch everything happen. Or you get to watch it from Sarah Connor's perspective, or you get to watch it from Kyle Reese's perspective, and I think that's the kind of place where these stories that, and they're not terribly complex stories. Like when we initially are presented with them, they only become complex after analysis, and we realize like that there's all these layers that are hinted at really subtly, and that have been able to spawn generations of really advanced fan fiction that has resulted in, what are we at now, 7 movies?
I think only 3 are canon.
Well, now there are only 3 that are canon because James Cameron's like, those movies are not canon. This is the official sequel to Terminator 2.
Yeah. Which is crazy that he can then come in and do that.
You know what? If Ridley Scott can come back and be like, oh yeah, we'll accept some of these additions to my universe.
Yeah.
Like,
no, for sure.
James Cameron's contributions can stay.
Well, and now that Disney owns The Simpsons, Star Wars, Marvel,
my God.
It's possible that Luke and Leia exist in the same universe as fucking Blade.
Luke and Leia might exist.
And Homer.
And Homer, that's what I was going to say. It's like Bart and Lisa and Luke and Leia and Blade. Oh my.
And Batman.
And Batman.
Because they own Batman 66 too.
Oh God. What a world.
And the aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fucking Predators.
Yeah.
All this shit is now... That's fucked up. So all this shit is in the same universe.
Queens are now in the pantheon of Disney evil queens.
Yeah.
And Ripley is now a Disney princess.
Mm-hmm.
Who's
maybe
people
a clone. Were like joking about that shit in memes, but
I mean, we're being objective about this.
Yeah.
Spider-Man's
officially
Spider-Man's a Disney prince. He is. He totally is.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else do we get out of this deal that actually kind of works out to be really amusing?
Well, I mean, I guess technically it's still Sony.
Yeah, whatever.
Disney borrows him, takes him to the ball.
Disney does to Spider-Man what we all want to be done to Spider-Man, whereas Sony just gives us these stories that are like
money grabs.
Who comes up with this crap?
Yeah.
Why did they have to condense 3 different story arcs into one movie? They're not like complementary. That reboot after the Tobey Maguire one with that
Andrew Garfield.
Yeah. Oh God,
I boycotted those.
I tried to watch one of them and I couldn't. I don't remember anything about it other than like, why have they done this to Spider-Man?
No,
I thought this was a good idea.
When they rebooted it and was like, we're gonna cast this new guy, I'm like, nope, not giving you any money, not watching it. I still haven't seen any of those. I don't know if they only made one or what. But Andrew Garfield, not my Spider-Man.
I think they made more than one. I'm pretty sure I think they made 2 at least.
Those are dead to me.
Yeah, it was the kind of thing that like.
This gets back to using your power as a consumer.
Yeah.
I use my power as a consumer. Now we have Tom Holland. I'm not saying I was responsible.
No.
But I didn't not boycott.
Nope. But Tom Holland's a good. Well, they're approaching Spider-Man from a good angle this time.
And we got Tobey Maguire back.
We do.
Yeah, in the fucking Spider-Verse, and they're talking about bringing him.
That's right.
They're talking about bringing the fucking live-action Spider-Verse because J. Jonah Jameson's now in it from the Tobey Maguire one. So it's very possible now that the live-action MCU will bring in Tobey Maguire for Spider-Verse.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, because it's They already said it was a multiverse. It's 100% a multiverse.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that we get old-ass Tobey Maguire back as Spider-Man on screen with Tom Holland and possibly Miles Morales.
I would like to see a Spider-Pig.
Voiced by John Mulaney.
I'm all about some Spider-Pig. Spider-Pig.
I feel like John Mulaney nailed that. Like,
Spider-Pig was like the most satisfying part of that movie because ever since the Simpsons movie when Homer's like Spider-Pig,
Spider-Ham.
Well,
I think they call him Spider-Ham in the shit, right?
Oh, that's right. But Homer was holding a pig on the ceiling and putting footprints on the ceiling and seeing his Spider-Pig does what a Spider-Pig does. And so seeing, a Spider-Ham.
Yeah, I forget. I thought it was Spider-Ham.
It was like, it probably is. I can't not say Spider-Pig because of The Simpsons. So now that they're all under the same umbrella, it's actually really fortuitous. If they really are, I mean.
There they are. No, that's a fact. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's not a speculation. That's a fact. Yeah. In fact, fucking Disney or the.
Oh, that's right. They announced a new head of the whole Marvel division.
Feige. Yeah, Kevin Feige is a master. He's a master of the comics too now.
Yeah.
Like he's the master of everything Marvel because he did such a good job with the MCU. Everything. Well, because Disney owned the comics for a while now, anyway. So,
So it's really just a matter of time.
Yeah. That shit's crazy.